evening, everyone. My name is Altaf. I'm the chair of the branch. Exciting to have this talk about cybersecurity and what next. We've had an amazing registration for this, 390, and still admitting a few users or users coming in. So great time, you know. This space in terms of cybersecurity is changing day by day, and I guess the threats also just get very, very clever, you know. We have Ross and Harry from Chalkline to give this talk, and we've been just waiting for this talk to actually happen as well. So it's a good time in terms of the 1st of February as well. Ross is the head of sales and account management at Chalkline. He has worked in the IT industry for 10 years, and in that time has supported a range of high-profile clients. So Harry's career, just at the age of 20, co-founded Chalkline, and within the IT sector began at a very young age of 20. Harry is heavily involved in R&D at Chalkline and strongly believes in a work smarter, not work harder, or not harder future. So I'm going to now hand over to Ross and Harry to give this talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Altaf, and thank you for having us on here. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be presenting this to you today. I was super excited when Altaf and BCS asked myself and Harry to present this. As Altaf said, security is a huge thing, irrelevant of the sector. It's something that everyone has to bear in mind. So when we were asked to present this today, we were super excited. Although it's just myself and Harry doing the talking today, we do want to try to keep this as interactive as possible. So please, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat window where Harry is going to be checking, and every so often we will pick a couple of questions and we'll go through and answer those as we go. We will also open up the floor to a Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. So first things first, in terms of just a very quick introduction to myself and Harry. As Altaf said, I'm Ross Stern. I'm the head of sales and account management at Chalkline. I've worked in the IT industry for around 10 years now, and I actually begun my career as a technical sales apprentice. I've used the skills, the knowledge that I learned on that course over the year, and put that to good use in the 10 years that followed. And I continue putting it to good use and growing on top of all of those things as well.
And afternoon all, I'm Harry, as the guys have said. I've also started my career with an apprenticeship, and as Altaf said, founded Chalkline about 6 years ago, with the aim to be, you know, the IT people that our clients speak to. We don't want to be speaking, we don't want them to have to speak to 7 people as part of the IT function. And every year, incrementally, or exponentially now, security has become the topic that people are worried about, want to talk about, or if they don't, we want to talk to them about it. It's just such a big conversation.
Thank you, Harry. So yeah, as we've both said, cybersecurity is at the forefront of everything that we do, everything that Chalkline does. So yeah, really excited to be bringing this presentation to you today. First things first, just a quick introduction to Chalkline. We provide IT strategy and support for ambitious businesses. Simply put, we provide a fully outsourced managed service to all of our clients. We're an extension of their business. We want to partner with these businesses and work with them. We typically work with businesses who will have an internal IT team, and quite literally overnight can grow from 1 IT staff member to 30. And we work as a great team, and it's something that we are. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we do. This is our bread and butter, and you know, we're growing strength to strength here. A little bit more about us. We're based in London. We have a team of 30+ people and 2 office dogs. We support over 120 clients with 2,500 users in those, spanning 10 countries. We are a Microsoft Solutions partner, working towards our Infrastructure Azure certification as well. please, of course, follow us on LinkedIn. We release some really good, interesting content, and it will be really good for you to follow us on there. We work with a range of clients. We work with businesses in accountancy, investment funds, wealth managers, law firms, recruitment, not-for-profit, property developers. So we have a real wealth of experience and knowledge within each sector there as well. Today's agenda, we're going to be discussing what cybersecurity is, a look at cybersecurity through the years. If you don't already have this, you should have this, and you should be talking about this. Now, a lot of these will make a lot more sense once we actually dig into the presentation. We want to keep it slightly open so that we can talk about different factors here. But I think the main thing just to start on here is, and as we've said throughout the whole presentation so far, is that the world of cybersecurity has changed vastly over the years and is constantly evolving around us due to the real life events. Whatever's happening in real life has an impact on everything. You saw during COVID, you know, the attacks on the NHS and various other places. Whatever's going on around us, and we have to all make sure we're on top of these things. And that brings me on to my next point of staying on top of what's best for a business can be really challenging. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to know, and a lot to keep yourself clued up on. And it's the managed service provider's duty. They have a duty of care to ensure that they're suggesting and recommending the right tools for all of their clients. As above, in this presentation, we're going to be going through the areas to look out for, the common trends, the threat, the future of cybersecurity, and how to mitigate the risk with different techniques. Cyber threats aren't going anywhere, so it's how we protect ourselves against these and take the right steps to shield ourselves. So, starting at the beginning, what is cybersecurity? Simply put, cybersecurity is how individuals and organizations reduce the risk of cyber attacks. Cybersecurity's core function is to protect the IT systems we use. It's how we layer up, and it's how we protect everything that we use on a day-to-day basis to ensure that we are shielded from these threats. And cybersecurity, the threats that we're experiencing, they're only getting more sophisticated. They're getting better at these things. So we have to make sure we're staying on top of it and ahead of them. Before we dive in and talk more about cybersecurity and the risks, we have to actually just think a little bit here about our mindset. What is our objective? If your plan is to stop hackers altogether, then you probably need to ditch your email and your internet and your mobile phone, and most definitely your laptop. The reality is, we're not actually suggesting that you should do that. People need all of these things to be able to work, to trade, do everything that they do on a day-to-day basis, online banking and everything that comes with it. What we're trying to point out here is that we're actually trying and we're aiming for risk avoidance. That's what IT security is about. So we have to accept that as a business and as an individual, that we're never going to totally remove the risk. Instead, we want to apply as many layers as we can to protect ourselves, to minimize the risk. That's the aim. We want to minimize the risks here. So when we're talking about removing certain elements, so your mobile phone, what we could do is we could allow people to use their mobile phones in the business, but actually we're going to enroll all of those mobile phones into a corporate MDM, mobile device management platform, that allows the organization to have a bit more control over those things. So, you know, allows you to wipe the device and lock it and locate it and various things like that. And another example may be to allow for remote working, because that was a real big change that we saw during the pandemic, that obviously had to allow for remote working. The solution there could be, we want to allow remote working, but it must be on an enrolled device, a trusted device, and you must also use multi-factor authentication as well, and that will help you to protect. So again, it's putting things in place that will help to minimize the risk.
But I mean, to add from a technical perspective, when we speak to customers, you can have it. We have MDM workshops where we look at what policies they want and what can be configured. And you get to a point where people sometimes go to the nth degree. Well, what if someone jumps in through our ceiling, steals one of our phones while it's in our hands, happens to guess our password, works out that the password was the dog's name and 32 at the end of it, and then gets in? And you kind of go, well, if that's really the thing you're trying to protect against, what you really want, as Ross said, is no computers and no humans, because they're your risks. What we're saying instead is we put the controls in to make things as secure, to have an acceptable level of risk.
Yeah. When we look at security, there's typically three main pillars here. We have detection, we have controls, and we have human. I'm going to try and use a home security analogy here just to try to explain the differences between the three, starting with detection. So detection is almost like your legacy security, which works on detection. So effectively like an intruder alarm. Somebody has broken into your house and your alarm is sounding. Now, typically the impact isn't as large. The person still got in, but the alarm is still sounding. So it allows you to work out that something's gone wrong, but you know, it's still sounding. Controls are there to provide security layers to prevent the attack from happening in the first place. So think of a lock on your front door, or building a new fence, you know, in your garden to stop people from getting in. It's what stopped the attack from taking place in the first place. And then lastly, human, and this is a really important one, as they all are, but a lot of people actually neglect this one a little bit more than the others, and that's around ensuring your staff are trained. So your human firewall. Train your team to understand what threats look like, what they can do should a threat reach the system, if it gets in, who they log it with, who they alert. Essentially not letting people into your house unless you know who they are or if they're expected. And certainly, which I know a lot of people do, don't broadcast on your social media that you're going on holiday, because then people clearly know that your house is has been left empty. So again, just moving it back to that home analogy there.
There are, I mean, we have cases with especially more of our regulated clients where they'll have really high anti-phishing policies, things that they are having, you know, where you'd usually expect a couple of emails to go through every week, let's say, you know, they don't. But then when they get that one in that month, the number of people that fall for these emails is crazy. So we've got clients who are taking things really, really seriously, but completely forgot that people do get phishing emails, and they still need to understand what they look like.
So why does security matter? And I think a lot of the information that I'm trying to present today does relay back to previous slides in here, because again, the cyber attacks are just becoming more sophisticated. They're getting better, and it is one of the biggest challenges, or you know, one of the top, as it says here, that we face in our digital age. Anything less than comprehensive security is no security at all. You have to have something in place. You should be looking at these things. You know, the cost of a breach here, as you can see, is huge. And for certain businesses, you know, a brand new one they might have just founded, that could be detrimental to them. So it's really, really, really important to start thinking about these and engage with a security company, engage with your MSP, your managed service provider, to ensure that they have a plan for you. You know, to ensure they're taking things seriously, because again, they have a duty of care, as do we, to protect our customers. I wanted to put a slide together here that just showed a few security basics. Now, I'm sure a lot of you on this call will already know most, if not all of these, but I think it really does just demonstrate there's also a lot of organizations out there who don't take these things seriously. You might gloss over them in your personal life as well. You know, people do certain things that are not best practices. So the same applies both business and personal. And we start off with passwords and passwords with a good policy. So what we mean by that is, if you are setting passwords in an organization, set them with a good policy there. So, you know, it can say, make sure you have 15 characters containing uppercase and lowercase, numbers, symbols, things like that. Make sure you have a good policy in place. Definitely try to use phrases rather than passwords as well. You know, I saw some examples where people have said, use things like to infinity and beyond, or the false Luke, and things like that. And then obviously you can choose what you do with that password, that phrase. You can capitalize certain letters and substitute letters for numbers and things like that. So again, it just makes it even more complex. IP restrictions for key systems. Lock down the systems to specific IP addresses where you can. If you don't want people to be able to access your core business applications from an address that you don't know or from an IP address that you don't know, lock them down. This is just going to provide you with greater security.
You can also use that for geolock. So if you, for instance, have a shipping portal you have and it's used by your team, then you probably don't need that to be accessed outside of the UK. So all of a sudden you are dramatically decreasing the number. If people are doing scans from other countries, they're not even going to see your server.
Install latest update. I'm sure a lot of people on this call, I'm guilty of it. You'll see updates popping up on your computers, again, personally or through work. And how many times do people press that ignore, update later? They're actually so crucial, because what they're doing is you're releasing the latest patches and security updates here. And if you're just postponing those and not doing them, then you are leaving your systems at risk of being breached. They're releasing them for a reason. And again, you know, I know during the pandemics, there were quite a few of these. Won't necessarily mention the names of some of the applications that were the biggest breaches, but there were scenarios where the organization had released updates, people hadn't then provided or downloaded that update, and therefore they were leaving themselves at risk. So that's a huge one there as well. Keep your antivirus up to date. Sounds like a very basic one, which is obviously what we're trying to intend to do here. I've seen countless companies where their antivirus is out of date, running old versions. It's running quite a legacy application as well that doesn't generally keep up with the trends. You need to make sure you're using an antivirus that is constantly searching the web for all of the latest threats, always learning. There are lots and lots of antivirus tools out there. Again, speak to your MSP about these. They definitely help you with them. Yeah, there are many there. And then lastly, only run trusted software. Again, sounds like a really simple one, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen people come to us and say, oh, I've tried to download this application. I don't really know what it is, and it's done X, Y, Z, and it's now affected us in this way. The point is that only run applications that you know. Only run them if you're expecting them to run, if you're expecting something to be downloaded. If somebody's asked you to download something to do something that you don't even know you should be doing, don't do it. If there's any questions, just simply don't do it. And we get on to a few other topics in this presentation shortly around zero trust, which will touch on this one a little bit more as well. A lot of the threats these days come through in two main pillars, and they are those that target your systems and those that target your people and processes. What I want to do is just go through a few of the key attacks here and threats, along with their impacts, because a lot of these have different purposes. A lot of them come in a way of different forms, and it's really important to know what they look like and what they are and what the impact is to you as a. So starting with ransomware. Ransomware infects your computer and the network and all devices connected to it. And what they will then do once they've got into those machines and those devices connected to the network is they'll encrypt your data. And the only way to unencrypt your data, typically, is to pay the ransom that they are asking.
So I actually, a couple of years ago now, we've had, unfortunately, we've had a few of these that we've had to look at. Not all our customers, and sometimes we've gone into kind of green environment. And you know, we've got to learn quite a lot about what's happened. And I mean, it's fascinating watching these guys work. And you've got people who have got customer service centers now, but they're the bad guys. It's crazy. But I mean, the important thing to flag here is that an attack doesn't start with ransomware; it ends with ransomware. It usually starts with some other form of attack, be it phishing to get onto a system, VPN they've managed to get through, or something like that. So we'll continue through that list, I guess.
Yeah. The next one here is Keylogger. So I'm not sure if you've all heard of Keylogger, but essentially this records every user keylog and activity that is going on that computer. What they're aiming to do here is get all of your personal information, bank details, your sensitive information, your information about you, your first name, last name, address details. If you've bought something through a computer, they've got to get everything, passwords, and and they'll give that straight to the cyber criminal. So whoever it is trying to get into that will just have access to it straight away. And of course, there's a huge impact there. The impact is data leakage, and they can do a lot with that. They can then, well, and your money, and they can steal your identity, and lots of different things there. Poor system patching. We're talking here around people exploiting your software. You haven't kept things up to date. Make sure, again, typically the responsibility of your MSP is to ensure that these applications and services are kept up to date. All of their patches are rolled out. There is a reason that these patches are rolled out, and there's no point delaying them. Make sure they're installed. And again, if they're not, the possibility here of further attacks is increased massively. That's the impact here. We'll move over to the people and processes now, because there are a few in here that I'm sure you'll probably know of. I receive a lot of these, or in fact I don't, because actually our spam filters are set up really, really well, and hopefully you're the same. I'm sure you'll all know what these are though, starting with phishing. So phishing is probably one of the most common threats targeting your people and processes, and it's a social engineering technique where the hacker, the criminal, will try to trick a user into giving information, and that's typically by entering their credentials or installing a piece of malware. So they might send you an email that says, your Microsoft subscription is due to expire soon, please can you click here to actually renew it. You'll go to log in, you'll be sat there typing in your username and password, and typically, which is really scary, you'll be typing in your correct password and email address, but they will still tell you that your username and password are incorrect. And the idea behind that is that they actually want you to be typing in every single combination of password that you can think of that you have set. And at that point, they've then got your email address and your password for multiple other systems. So bear that in mind. It's a huge risk. And again, the impact there is data leakage and obviously loss of data. We then have spear phishing and whaling. Spear phishing and whaling, very similar, but there is a key difference, and I'll get onto that in a second. They're a targeted phishing attack. So typically they're personalized and with a sense of urgency. So you might get an email that says, please urgently transfer £1,000 to this charity. And it tries to create that urgency for you, because you will then panic yourself into doing it. And just in terms of the differences there, the difference between spear phishing and whaling is that a whaling attack typically targets senior staff. So again, you might receive an email from someone who looks like your director, and they're not your director, but how many people are actually checking that email address? They'll just see your director's name and actually just go through with the request.
What they tend to do.
Question.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, I just looking to see. I'm just doing at the minute. I doing a level 4 NFQ in pre-tech apprenticeship with fast track into information technology. I'm just looking to see. I'm interested in going down the cyber security route. I'm just looking to see, is there a lot of coding involved in it?
Coding. I mean, I guess it depends on what specific you're looking for. I tell you what, let's let's save that question if that's all right. I'm gonna push that one to the end, but we've got some time for Q&A at the end. Yeah. So I'll make sure we come back to that then.
Okay, that's perfect.
I'm writing that now so I don't forget.
Cool. Thank you. And yes, lastly, password attacks. If you're reusing passwords across websites, personally, you shouldn't be. This is part of the best practice there. If it were to get discovered via a hack, possibly a phishing site, it can be sold on the dark web. And then, criminals out there will use that, and they'll then get into your. And I think this actually is a really key point on here as well, the password attack. We were speaking about the basic security tools in the previous slides. One of the other key things to mention here is that don't use any known information in your passwords. Don't use your street you grew up on if people know that information. Don't use your siblings' names, family names, pet names, things like that. Don't use your name. Obviously, that's a huge risk as well.
There's a very interesting, I see it come on LinkedIn probably every 6 months when, if you've got a Facebook account and you see these pictures that get posted saying, comment if you remember what your phone number was when you were younger. and you just see thousands of people comment with their numbers, or what was your first pet's name? And people, you get tens of thousands of comments, and people don't realize that someone's just sticking that in a database somewhere. So yeah, very easy to get that information for specific people.
And it's just about keeping your wits about you, because if you see stuff like that, there is a reason they're asking for that information. Like Harry said, they're using that, putting it into a database, and it doesn't take too long to work out an email address, based on who you are, the company you work at. So yeah, keep all of that in mind. Zero trust. So I touched on that in the previous slide as well. I don't know how many people on this call know about the zero trust security model. It's a relatively new buzzword in the cyber world, and is a concept that, but it is actually a concept that has been around quite a long time. So if we look back towards 1989, when the first firewall was proposed, the firewall enabled us to stop trusting and even allowing everyone and anything onto our networks. We could essentially begin closing off ports and only open the port that we knew needed to be open, and only when they needed to be opened. So essentially using firewalls allowed us to begin a default deny policy, so only allowing things when required. This has then evolved over the years. It's spread across to emails, it's gone to, as I said, firewalls, so on and so forth, and it's continued evolving over the years. Zero trust as a concept is really, really straightforward and simple. By default, deny everything, trust nothing, and only allow what is necessary at the least privilege possible. So I guess just taking that back to what that means for you and your business, essentially, you need to treat every user, device, application, and any data as untrusted. You just want to put in that default deny policy and default untrusted policy. Assume that everything you're working with is a risk until you deem it otherwise. And there are a few techniques that we can use as part of zero trust that everyone should bear in mind. And the first one here is verify explicitly. So authenticate and authorize based on all available data points that you have. And they can be user identity. Who is it? Who's the person trying to install something or gain access to your system?
And how do you know they are who they say they are?
And how do you know exactly? Authenticate, call them, ask that individual, by the way, are you trying to access this? Is that really you? Where are they? Have a look at the location. Where is that request coming from? Look at the device. What device are they working on? Is it their trusted device that they're always using, that's enrolled in your MDM policy? Look at the service, the application, the data they're trying to access, and all of those things. So verify what they're trying to do. Use least privilege. Limit the user to what they need. So what we mean by this is, if a user needs local admin to be able to download a particular application, only provide them with just enough access for that purpose. So give them that local admin only, and also just in time. So what we mean by that is only give them local admin for the period of time that they need it for. Don't extend it. Don't give them any more than they need. Only give them what they need. So use least privilege for that purpose. And lastly, assume breach. So I said it when I was just explaining the zero trust model. Assume everything is a breach until you have verified it. What you are trying to do here is minimize your blast radius. So if something gets in, you want to try and segment access. And if you've used your use least privilege, you are going to segment the access there. It's going to stop that individual having access to another area, and therefore you've minimized your blast radius. So again, verify, use analytics to get visibility of these things, threat detection, and you should be in a good position there. And I'm going to show you now on the next few slides are some more controls to keep to a zero trust security model. Starting with allow listing. So this is highly recommended, and it's something that we are recommending to all of our clients. Implement application allow listing and move towards a proactive offense rather than a reactive defense. So start off, as we've said, and I know I keep saying the same thing here, but don't trust anything. Trust no application, block everything. And from there, build in the applications that you want to trust. So you just build up your pile from then on. And it actually brings us really nicely onto ring fencing.
So when you allow an application, so I mean, the greatest example is something like PowerShell. PowerShell will be allowed on 99% of machines. It's how a lot of things run. So what anyone can do if they want, whether they've got admin or not, is run specific commands. For instance, to copy everything in a specific folder, zip it all up and upload it to someone's OneDrive, Google Drive, FTP server, you know, wherever they want. That doesn't need that doesn't need any software installed. That can just use the components installed in an operating system. So what you can do is ring fence the applications and say, well, you shouldn't be able to access the internet, or maybe you can access these IPs or these host names, but you definitely don't need full access. And you can also say, maybe it shouldn't access all your files. Maybe it's just a specific drive, maybe just a specific, maybe some external media, whatever it might be. But you can, it's really important to limit those. So if you've got QuickBooks or Sage, for instance, they don't need access to all data. They need access to account, that sort of thing.
Next, we have elevation control. So I'll start by saying I hope you're not giving all of your users local admin, or actually as little amount as you can, because it is obviously a big security. And it should be down to your MSP to enable the download of applications and certain things to run. You want to avoid this amount of people having that control. If you are giving people local admin and elevating their control, as it says, you should only be doing it for the task at hand and on the limited time frame that they need it. There are certain solutions out there now that do a selective elevation. So you can essentially allow users to elevate in certain situations, so specific to what they're doing. As an example, a new piece of software is being deployed and only for that set period of time. So there are really, really neat tools that allow you to do this. Storage control is also a really important one that I don't see enough of. You know, there are specific industries that do this a lot more than others. And again, it just depends on the data you work with, but it's good to be mindful of it and start thinking about things. You can control your storage access. You can control it based on file type, users and groups, applications. And we're talking about potentially locking down USB sticks here. So you could lock them down to a particular serial number. You can even stop USB stick working entirely. You know, it just depends on the type of data you're working with. And as I've just said, you can filter that based on the type of data you're working on as well. And network access control. So lock down your endpoint, block inbound and outbound traffic. What do you want on your network to be able to see with each other? So again, we're talking about minimizing the blast rate and minimizing the risk should something get in. If you're creating, I guess, locking down the network and stopping certain elements from seeing each other, you're helping yourself here. You're layering and you're preventing these things from happening.
To add as well, you know, you've got people invest a lot in their firewalls, and that is really important. They're hardware firewalls in their office that allows traffic in and out. But you now have a lot of people who are walking out with that laptop, taking it home, and it is never going to see that firewall while it's at home. And yes, you might have VPNs for certain resources, and you might have certain controls, but it is still sitting on usually someone's home network, whether it's a BT or a Virgin Hub or something like that. Could be running God knows what else on that network. So it's really important to bear in mind what can access your endpoint, what can see it.
Thank you. And multi-factor authentication. I am sure almost every single one of you will be using this. If not, yeah, I hope. And I was going to say, if not, definitely begin. This is personal accounts as well. Things like banking apps normally come with it, but you know, your Amazon account, your social media accounts, make sure you use the inbuilt MFA functions, because they are so important. For those of you that don't know what MFA, multi-factor authentication, is, multi-factor authentication requires users to provide 2 or more verification factors to log in. They are typically something you know, which is your password or a PIN. They are something you have, which is your phone. And they are something you are, so your fingerprint. So, you know, some of you will have a device that has a fingerprint scanner on it. Some of the laptops do, you know, your devices do. You should definitely be enabling this for your accounts. It adds that second layer of protection. If somebody has managed to, you know, if one of your members of staff have fallen for a phishing attack, they've inputted their information and somebody has obtained their credentials, you have the ability to prevent that from getting any further by the user then denying that request. It's so important, and Microsoft actually make it a requirement for all of their partners to make sure they have it enabled. So why would every single end user not do the same thing? And one of the key things to talk about with multi-factor authentication is something called MFA fatigue. It is exactly what it sounds like. It's where a user will approve a malicious MFA mobile prompt, normally by accident, as a result of receiving so many attempts on their phone that they have just by accident pressed on the wrong one at the wrong time, and it's let this criminal in, or because they've been convinced to let that hacker in through a phishing attack. So somebody might have called you and said they're from your IT department, you need to let us onto your computer, into your emails as an example. I'm just going to pop a request through to you, can you approve it? You know, they have then forced their way through and you've been convinced of that. So it's really, really important that users stay educated on MFA, things to look for. They need to know that if a prompt has popped up on their phone, is that really them? Is there something going on in the background that they're not aware of? And there are mitigations that you can now enable on most MFA platforms. And, you know, as an example of this, Microsoft now actually enabled you, as you can see on my screen now, to enter.
Tony just got there about 60 seconds before that. On the chat.
Okay, so someone's put it in the chat. So yeah, Microsoft, the MFA prompt now allows you to put in a number. It will also give you the app they're trying to log into as well as the location. So again, we're talking about verify and think about these things. It's down to a user at this point to say, oh, am I really in said country that is coming through on this location? Am I really trying to log into Exchange or SharePoint? No, I'm not. I'm still just working on the document I'm on. So it's just about being aware. And yes, the really good thing about having the ability to enter this number is that, yes, you might have MFA fatigue. You might be, you know, you might not be paying as much attention to the acceptance notification, but actually you've still got to type in a number here. So it does give you a bit more of a chance to save yourself at this point.
But doesn't make it foolproof. Someone can still do it. If they get a call and are told to type in, you know, in that case, if I phone someone and said, just type 95, they're going to do it. So, oh, hopefully they won't. So, you know, that should be a question there.
So we come on to the topic around user training, and in particular phishing campaigns, because this is something that a lot of organizations experience. I know they do because we speak to them daily. Phishing training, phishing campaigns, user training, cybersecurity training is also important. And a lot of organizations have to prove they're doing these things from a cyber insurance perspective, from a, you know, they might need to pass certain audits, you know, winning new contracts. They have to prove that they're keeping their users educated. And we work with we use a really, really great tool that allows us to do these things. And I'll touch more on that in a second. So what we're talking about here is policies and procedures. So do you have the right policies and procedures in place? I.e., if there is a breach or you do receive an email, do your users know what to do and where to go? Do they know who to send the phishing email to check if it's real and authentic? Do they know how to check that it's authentic and real?
Sorry, so to add here, do they know, what's the culture like? If someone makes a mistake and clicks on a phishing email, how does that get responded to? Is someone likely to hide that and keep it quiet because they screwed up, but it'll probably be fine? Or have you got a culture of report it anyway? I mean, we say, I did a few quite vicious campaigns internally to prove just how easy it is for the guys to fall for things. And it happened, a few people click things. And when they do, people now know, you know, it becomes it's a bit comical when it happens. We laugh about it, but people do understand the importance of it. And every time we run it, it got better and better to a point where no one clicks them. So yes, it's important for that culture side as well.
Exactly, and I think I just touched upon this in the previous comment, was make sure people understand what those threats look like. Do they understand what a whaling attack is, a phishing attack? Because once they understand these things, it will be much easier for them to identify and then actually try to remove as much risk as possible. If someone knows telltale signs of a phishing email, they'll know when they receive one, or hopefully they will. Again, none of these things are foolproof. It does come down to the user, and there are several factors that may play a point in this where they may not be able to detect these things, but make sure that everyone knows, make sure they understand, and provide them with that training. And lastly, which is what I touched upon just now, was your regular phishing emails to test users. So we work with a really, really great tool that will provide us with phishing campaigns. And the way that it will do this is, I'm sure many of you have tried this before, but you'll send out a phishing email to test your staff, and one person will receive the email, and they will then say out it across the business, oh, everyone, I've just received this email from XYZ. Don't click it, it's a phishing email. And therefore your test is just null and void because everyone's detected it. In reality, that is exactly what you want to happen. Yeah, it's perfect, but with phishing campaigns and testing people, you don't want that to happen. This tool is really brilliant because what it will do is it will send them targeted emails based on their position, based on the teams they're in, and it will do it at different times with different emails. So it prevents people from being able to warn and pre-warn other members of the team and company. And what it's also intelligent enough to do is, as an example, if I've sent a phishing email to Harry and Harry clicks it, his risk score goes up. You can then enable Harry to go into a slightly higher risk category, which will then send him more targeted emails to try to educate him and show him on, where he should be clicking and what he shouldn't be clicking on. And they will come with education portals. So it might give you, again, targeted educational videos on, you've clicked this email, this is what you should be looking for, and these are the things you should have detected. So it's a really, really fantastic tool, and there are lots out there, so you should definitely be looking into these. A password manager. So again, and I'm going to touch on most of these when we do a bit of a roundup at the end. Chalkline have a really, really mature bundle of products that we put into our clients' environments to ensure they are protected. And I'm only scratching the surface in this presentation because there are a load in there. But one of the really important ones, and certainly from a user perspective, it's really, really beneficial to have, is a password manager tool. So ideally, as it says here, you should be using single sign-on for your corporate resources. So things like your email, your SharePoint, things like that. But on the odd occasion, or in quite a lot of occasions in some businesses, you do have to create an ad hoc account. You might need to create a new shipping account for said courier company, or whatever the example is. And this is where a password manager comes into play. It's really, really great. And again, you should definitely be using this both personally and also through business, because they are just fantastic. A password manager provides the benefits that you're looking at on the screen here. So you'll get an encrypted vault for every user. So each user will be able to log into their portal, and they'll be able to see a list of websites and applications that require their username and password, and they're stored there. It's encrypted end to end. So it's really, really good. A built-in password generator. So again, how many times have you struggled to think of a new password for a site, and you've added an extra number or an exclamation mark or a different character to the end of an already used password? Everyone, I say everyone, not everyone, a lot of people do it. It's very, very common. This has, or most will have, a built-in password generator, and you can set the complexity. So you can specify that you want a 15-character password with uppercase and lowercase, and it will just generate those passwords, and they'll be very, very difficult to guess. Password reviews, it will tell you if your password is being reused anywhere across the site. So it will come up and say, here's a warning, you are using this password on 3 other websites, and think about changing it. But it will also tell you if the password is too easy to guess. If you've inputted your own password, you haven't gone through the generator, it will tell you which ones are too easy. Single sign-on to access the portal. So each user should have this, and it will allow them to get straight into the portal as and when they log in. Sharing your passwords across teams. So as I mentioned with the secured vault for every user, everyone will get their own personal folder, but what you can also do is you have the ability to create shared team environments. So you might have a sales team, an HR team, finance team, and each team will have access to their own area and only their own area. And in there, you can share the usernames and passwords across those accounts.
So no more Teams or Slack DMs with passwords or WhatsApp messages or God knows what else people use to kind of communicate passwords that end up being quite important.
Exactly. And actually that touches us nicely onto the last point here, avoid siloed information. When people are sending information across via Teams or Slack, it silos the information. Nobody else in the organization has visibility of that username and password or the information that's being discussed in that message. So enabling you to have all of these in one area specific to a team or individual avoids the siloed information. We come on to Cyber Essentials now. This is something that we are helping all of our clients with at the moment, and it's something that's increasingly important to many businesses out there, many sectors. We're seeing an increasing amount of clients requiring you to have this in order to work with them and in order to provide any goods or services. And I mean, a really good example where we have helped a customer with this. One of our clients had very little security when we first onboarded them to Chalkline. We came in, went through our security packages. They then decided to go ahead with it. And within 24 hours, we were able to turn the red crosses on their Cyber Essentials certification to green tip within 24 hours. And I think that, again, the point that we're trying to make here is that we know what work, we know what businesses need. Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus are growing. We've spent a huge amount of time helping our clients with these. It's a huge tick in the box for insurance. It's almost like you know, having an immobilizer in your car. You know, these things are really good to prove and show that you've got in place.
But also on Cyber Essentials, I mean, you see sometimes that people can. There's some questions that you could questionably pass. So you can kind of pass it if you use certain words. I mean, that's something that when we wouldn't agree with that, and you know, we would always push to say, let's answer it properly. You know, if there is a control we can put in place to cover this answer, that's what we should be doing, rather than suggesting, you know, users have to do this manually or whatever it might be. Even if it would technically get us a pass, you know, we still want to be doing it right.
We also, as an organization, as an MSP, from our perspective, we have a duty of care to ensure that you, our client, can implement and have implemented a strong approach to security. I highly recommend you do this internally as well, and you'll see why in a second, but it's crucial. You have to make sure you do this. And we start this approach to security by learning the landscape. Stay up to date on those new security challenges, the tools that are out there to combat those as well. So if you know there's a new threat or risk out there, what are the tools to combat it? And again, it's normally down to the MSP to provide you with that help and the guidance there. But make sure you're keeping an eye on these things as well. It's so important. Identify and add security contact. Internally, as an organization, identify who your key contacts are for a security breach. Who do you go to? Who's responsible for sending out the comms to your clients and users? Who's responsible for speaking to your IT teams to make sure you've got a backup restore happening within the next 10 minutes? Who is that person that's going to rally everyone up and get going again? Secure your identity. Take action. And when I say take action, I mean look at things like multi-factor authentication. Turn those things on across all of your estate, all of your applications that you use, your line of business applications. most, if not all, should have the ability to turn these things on. Do that, enable them, and make sure everybody is using them. Remove any unnecessary elevated admin. If there's somebody in your organization that has admin because they've been given it in the past, remove that. They don't need it, and give it back to them once they say they need it again. Secure your endpoints. Invest in the latest and greatest products. These products can be used to detect, investigate, and respond. There are some really, really great products out there that will do this for you on an automatic basis. That's exactly what they're for. Make sure you're putting these things in place. And again, this is something that your MSP can help you with. And then lastly, ongoing monitoring. We spoke a lot about the zero trust framework, in that by default, everything should be untrusted. Make sure that you are tapping into that and the resources to help you detect the fraud and protect all of your identities. Make sure you are using those fundamentals where by design you're not trusting things, and you're letting them in once you know that it's a valid resource. Have you got a plan? So again, touches on the last slide. We spoke about having the internal team that's responsible for attack. Do you have cyber insurance in place? If you do, please make sure you've got their number on speed dial, as we said there. Make sure you've got the details. I'm not suggesting you will ever use it, but increasing amounts are needed now, and you need to make sure you have all of your information to hand. Do you have a comms plan? How would you communicate a breach to your users and clients without the systems? So as an example, if your emails have been breached, how are you going to communicate with all of your clients? Are you going to call them? Do you have a plan? Are you going to go to their doors and say what's happened? You need to make sure you have planned. Backups, offline backups, are just as important. If you've lost all connection to the internet, or you can't access those for whatever reason, that may be where the breach has occurred. They may have encrypted all of that data. Do you have an offline backup that can take you back and restore to that version as well? And then lastly, test your plan. There are loads of really good tabletop exercises that you can use, really great, almost simulation games, as we spoke about, as it says there. Do simulations internally, write out your plan, assume there's been an attack, and get everyone singing off of the same hymn sheet. Who deals with what, whose responsibility is each point, and make sure everyone is aware of exactly what's going on.
There was a very, we've done a few internally, and there's interesting things that come out, and one of them is, is someone going to be responsible for, let's call it HR. You're going to have a lot of, if you had a larger attack, you're going to have a situation where you're going to have a lot of team members being needed 24/7 for a number of days. You need someone in charge of food. It sounds really silly, really funny at the time, but then you've got someone that needs to be focused on the situation, and they need to not have to worry about certain things. So all that stuff should come in as part of your.
Exactly, and I think it's just on that as well. It's, you don't realize how much there is to think about until you actually start writing these down. We've heard stories before where people have already spoken to particular suppliers and made sure they've got a backup, price approved with them, where should a server go down, they've just got money, sat there waiting to go ahead and purchase a server. It's how quick can you do these things? And I'll start by saying, obviously, thank you very much for your time. I hope everybody has learned something. I guess from what we've shown you today, the clear message is that cybersecurity, it's not going anywhere. The risks aren't going anywhere. The threat is growing. How you minimize that risk, how you mitigate it, how you layer up your security, and how you protect yourself. It's just keeping on top, making sure your users are trained and everyone is aware of all of the latest threats going on. Thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to, I'm just seeing the time. So I appreciate everyone may be a bit stretched for time here, but I don't know if there are any questions that we can answer in there. in the Q&A.
I mean, there's a few
Thank
discussions.
you. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Ross. Thank you, Harry, as well. Yeah, I think we've got a few minutes more, and I'm sure because of the interesting topic and your presentation as well, I'm sure if people do want to ask some questions, I guess far away, you know. I do have one. In that, in today's hybrid environment today, where people sort of working from different locations and things like that, is how do you verify a support staff calling a user and say, here, I'm so and so, whatever it might be, I need to access your computer to, what do organizations do today?
That's a very interesting one, and it's one we've kind of encountered. I mean, to be honest, you get that problem both sides. How does the support person know that the person you're speaking to is that right person, and vice versa? I mean, the biggest advice I would give is the one that you have with your bank. If your phone rings, you get a call from the bank, and you're not sure, or you're being asked to hand over a PIN code or something, the best thing to do is hang up and call back. No bank is ever going to refuse that call because you are doing the right, you're taking the right measure. And I would say that's similar. If you're getting a call from a support organization, I'd probably hang up and call back the number you know. But then on the flip side, if they're asking for your password, you probably shouldn't be giving your password either way. Well, not probably, you shouldn't. So in that scenario, I think it's looking at, I guess it's looking at elements of the zero trust model. You shouldn't just be assuming they're who they say they are. But either way, they don't need your password to do their job. Well, very rarely, worst case scenario, if they really need to recreate something, they can reset it and you can reset it back. But because you have MFA, they wouldn't really be able to do much by the way you'd hope.
True. Thank you. Thank you. I guess anyone for a last question?
So there's a couple of messages around VPNs. Is a VPN a good? Oh, there's a lot. Okay, sorry, I've just scrolled me down. About use of VPNs and security. I mean, I think from my perspective, it always depends on what you're connecting to. And you've got a lot of VPNs that will allow you to access a specific corporate resource, but nothing else. You then have full tunneling VPNs where all internet traffic is going to go through a cloud or an on-premise gateway that's managed by you. You then come from a single IP address. They're all great tools. Sometimes they can be quite expensive, and possibly you need to make sure that they won't impact the performance or the reliability of the user's device. I think that's really important. But if they work, then they are a great tool. Similar to something like an RDS or an Azure Virtual Desktop solution, where you would go onto a secured desktop that's configured to an organization's security requirements, and you, from your actual device, the only thing you can actually do is connect to that desktop. You can't download any data or access any resources or do any printing or anything like that.
There's an interesting question here, Harry. I know we're just a couple of minutes. Is basically, I have a quick question in terms of emerging cyber threats going forward. What do you think the plans are with regards to AI and polymorphic malware?
How long have we got?
I mean, look, when you look at AI, I mean, the AI conversation is so, I mean, you look at some of the ChatGPT conversations that are going on at the moment, and they are really interesting. Not only because of things that it can actually do from a general IT perspective, but people are now, I mean, you're seeing now, I think Microsoft and Amazon have now asked their team to stop using it because they're putting company secrets into the tool. It's then learning from those secrets and then handing them out to other people. And that, you know, that's a security issue in itself. And you see other people who are using deep fakes and things like that and pretending to be executives, and you know, there's a lot of very scary things out there and very scary threats. And I mean, it will be very interesting to see how this evolves over the coming years.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And just for everyone's sort of information, these slides will be published on our website, and this recording will also be published on, will be uploaded to YouTube. So keep an eye on that. And thank you again, Ross and Harry. Thank you everyone as well for attending. Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Goodbye. Bye.